but that held me back by about 10 minutes and I had to reach late here. So, apologies on that. I will start by congratulating the CII for having initiated a process which was generally talked about for some time, but which was the need of the hour. Particularly after the G20 India presidency, I think it's just the right thing to do and the thing which is so needed now, because if the emerging market countries, EMEs, emerging market economies, are going to be the growth engine, and the learnings from the G20 India presidency all indicate towards the need for greater discussion and a global engagement to understand where exactly the world will have to move from where we are today, at least for the next 20-25 years. Each country can have its own agenda, its own traction of its strength, and also the challenges that it has to face can all be specific to countries. But there is today, particularly today, post-COVID, post-recovery, somewhat partial I would say, post also unexpected, not one but 3 wars, the major disruptions that the world has seen. It has become necessary from the point of view of all voices to be heard, opinions to be churned, and the global agenda be set where all the voices have been taken into consideration. The agenda can be very well tailored on a larger macro level, at a global level, but from it, there should be a benefit and an inclusion of all countries. The inclusion of Global South, meaning the voice of the Global South heard prior to the G20 presidency by Honorable Prime Minister of India, and post that, making sure that the agenda that India presidency puts forward in the G20 would reflect the concerns of the Global South, have all shown that if there is will and if there is concerted action, if there is consensus and intent getting converted to action, then it is possible. The entry of the African Union into the G20 during India presidency showcases that the G20's will to act was there, it translated into action, and therefore you saw the entry of African Union into the G20. I am indeed grateful to the entire G20 membership for having enabled that. So with this kind of a background, if thought engines will have to exist somewhere, global growth engines can be in the emerging market economies, but thought engines will also have to contribute to it. And if thought engines have to contribute, they can't be somewhere exclusive in one corner of the world where the South doesn't reach. And therefore, this attempt of the CII, particularly immediately after the G20 India presidency, and particularly after the African Union's entry into the G20, is just the right thing to do, and I'm indeed grateful, therefore, for all of you who have come over here to participate in this. It is going to be absolutely necessary to keep this momentum up, not just 1 year. For the next few years, we have to persist on this job of putting forward the concerns of the Global South in both the development and development-related actions, and also in those actions which are going to be global, but which will have a bearing on all of us, top of the agenda being climate action. I was glad to hear Professor Ricardo Hosman speak specifically now in his brief intervention about what exactly has to happen on climate action. I heard him keenly and absolutely right that there cannot be mitigation, adaptation related discussions from the standpoint of view of how much it's going to hit me. It also has to be from the point of view of how much of opportunity lies in it for all of us. And for that, of course, there needs to be a lot of thinking, sharing of ideas, and making good that those ideas don't just remain on the table where we discuss, but translate into specific action. So I would think the CII should keep this as an annual calendar event, make sure that this becomes a forum for policymakers to look to and seek ideas and thoughts with which policy which will have a positive bearing on the emerging market and economies and also the global south. There are a few thoughts I had even as Professor Hosman was speaking, that the transitional energy, which he did not mention as a word, but I'm bringing it here, transitional energy challenge is a very big challenge. In the meanwhile, the rapidity with which we want to make ourselves green is another challenge running parallel, but both going in different speeds. Transitional energy and the cost of transitional energy is something which all of us are thinking about. The base energy requirement cannot be filled by renewable energy sources. It's well known, but it is possible to think in terms of rapidly spreading the renewable energy in such a way that individual participation is ensured. India's, if I may use the word, India's success in rapidly moving in the renewable energy space, particularly through the solar, is because both the large park establishments and also the rooftop and the farm hedge-based solar panels are happening simultaneously. We are not just dedicating large stretches of land, barren land, desert land to become the solar hubs. We are equally looking at small holdings of farmland which can have in their boundaries solar panels. Small households have solar panels on their rooftop with the assurance given to them that over and above what they consume, the rest can go to the grid and they will receive payments for it. So there has been a lot of thought going into India's solar and renewable energy execution, fulfilling our norms, nationally determined criteria, conditions, and also moving from one COP to another. The achievements of India in the renewable energy space is because we are making it inclusive. Development has to be inclusive, but the contribution towards these milestones will also have to be inclusive. Only then people realize that these are not things happening beyond them and that they have nothing to do with it. When they contribute to it, they also see the value that it brings to them as individuals and also as a society. One of the thought which Honorable Prime Minister Modi has also been talking to a lot of countries about in the context of International Solar Alliance is, can the world not be linked with grids running across countries and eventually touching every part of the world which will have sunshine 24/7. In the sense, there's always days somewhere when there is night elsewhere. So there should be a global connective grid system operating so that from somewhere there is solar energy getting onto the grid which keeps flowing where it is required. So life can become easier. The International Solar Alliance's approach to have a global grid connectivity, about which I'm glad I have had conversation with Ajay Banga, the World Bank president, to see if that can be done in parts so that eventually we are able to link it all up. Similarly, I also have an appreciation, sense of appreciation. And I would think this is worth moving forward also, the Global Biofuel Alliance. Biofuel is within the realm of every country. You have your own sources of biofuel. You can do it yourselves. And I'm happy to say, when I was the defense minister, we even tried out using aviation fuel, which had a component of biofuel in it, and it was very big a success. Defense establishments were happy to see that biofuel can become effective fuel for particularly the aircrafts. So there are little but significant innovations happening, and I think we should move in that direction. I'll expand on just one more thing, because I said we should have a think engine, not just a growth engine in the global south. Think engine also reflecting the concerns and achievements of the emerging market economies, because it is the various innovative ways with which the emerging markets that have attempted to keep the economy buoyant post the COVID, which have made them stand out as real triggers of growth post-COVID. And therefore, it's worth picking up one or two of those achievements and benefiting from it, so that the engines are truly the fast-going engines which can pull the entire global growth bogies which are waiting to move forward. One such a thing from India is the digital technology adoption. It is one thing that the government had invested and created the infrastructure required for the digital world. Whether you used it for communication, whether it was being used for marketing, whether for health and health service provision, or whether it was financial technology, which was being used for inclusion in the financial world. We have proved that not only our innovations work, but they have been rapidly scaled up and adapted by people who live in the far-flung areas, by women, by semi-literate people. So India's digital achievements, which were very much showcased during the G20 presidency, stand out as an example for two things. One, for inclusion, and inclusion without corruption. Because many of the emerging market worlds, that's not to say that developed countries are free of corruption in total, but emerging market and also global south need such technology-driven instruments to make their economies transparent, to be well-governed, and to make sure everybody benefits from governance. So India's fintech revolution, which actually showcases itself through the payment revolution that is happening digitally, has actually shown it is possible to have inclusion, better governance by saving money through technology. India, for instance, after having brought the direct benefit transfer to the accounts of the poor, government's money going to the accounts of the poor directly, have saved more than 2 trillion Indian rupees. 2 lakh crores of Indian rupees has been saved because no more spurious recipient of these benefits. So that makes a difference to your governance itself, brings transparency to the system, and the ultimate beneficiary gets the total amount which is due to him, and no pilferages happen. So if this is one side of the story, the other is the common citizen who's well away from the governance headquarters realizes that that very instrument which gives him the benefits also gives him the access to the global market. The way in which Prime Minister Modi has been pushing vocal for local, meaning be vocal about the local products, has made sure that India's poor artisans who stay in the backwaters of the hinterland are today able to make access to the global market. And just around Deepavali, which is a big festival for India, their sales have touched about 1.5 lakh crores. So it's no longer small 1,000 rupees or 10,000 rupees. The cumulative effect of technology reaching your doorsteps, adapted by common people because it's simpler to use, it can be used in any instrument, you don't need to have a smartphone, and if the language is in the language of the user, and India, I'm sure you are aware, has more than 22 languages officially declared as languages active in use. There are very many more dialects as well. So when people are able to use it in their hands, inclusion is achieved. I've been in the policy world for some time, not just as a minister, but even before that. This word inclusion has been on for a very long time. But today, India can stand before you with its head held high, saying how inclusion was brought in just by sheer nudge. The Prime Minister could stand up and speak in his first address from Red Fort, saying those who are receiving subsidy for cooking gas, who don't deserve to get it, who are well above the poverty level, would they please give it up? And they did. More than 1 crore people gave it up. But that was immediately transferred to the poorest of the poor. Technology, similarly, just a nudge, small incentives have been adapted. So it's impacted on good governance positively. It has brought in inclusion, and all the sloganeering about inclusion did not have such results. So my submission for this forum, which is meeting at a very critical time when the global thought process will have to be inclusive, is such examples are better in achieving inclusion, in achieving green goals, than, I'm sorry, I will take this opportunity and use this platform to say it, than a single mono-sided decision to bring in border adjustment taxes. I want to make my industry green, so I will impose on you a certain tax because you're coming up with non-green products, and with that money, I will make my industry green. The border adjustment tax logic just goes against the concern of the South, the global South. Every country will have to have resources generated to meet with the demands so that we are better adjusted to the green commitments that we've made globally. But cross-border imposition and that money going towards somebody else's green agenda, if anything, if I don't sound extreme and if you will indulge me for a minute, is not moral at all. Lastly, whether it is climate, I understand you have 6 sessions. Very good concerns have been picked up. Economic growth, on which all of us are speaking. You need to have technology. You need to have innovative ways of funding your own growth. You need to make sure that you've identified sections which need that kind of help. In a recent discussion, Honorable Prime Minister openly said, for a complex and very diverse country like India, he said, look, I look at only 4 different sections of India's society. And many of you I can see in the audience who are not from India. You must have heard about very many divisions, which are natural. They have their strength, they have their weakness. But they have been effectively used by forces who do not want India to move fast on the growth track to speak against whether it is caste, whether it is regional differences, whether it is linguistic division, or whether it is even religious differences. Things don't help if you divide using any of these. So the Honorable Prime Minister has given, and I'm saying this today because it is necessary for us to understand that every aspect of India's growth will have to be addressed, and that is what is making delivery possible to the last person who's waiting there saying, I need some help from the government. And therefore, from the point of view of Prime Minister Modi, it was only the poorest of the poor as one group who needs immediate attention for all kinds of governmental support. The farmer, because he produces everything that which not just you, but the entire globe requires. Look at the insecurity that the wars have brought on us on food security matters. Total insecurity. Will I get my grain? Will there be enough food on the table at home? Will the supplies come from those war-affected countries? Do we need this? So if countries do focus on their farmers, and for which, of course, the age-old fight of the global south against the WTO, for instance, for having accepted rules which are very favorable for some countries in giving assistance to their farmers, but not accepting any other country, such as the emerging market economies, to give assistance to their farmers. The globe needs food, not just India. The globe needs food, not just the Indian poor. And if only these restrictions were not on India, we would have served the world with adequate food grains, and I'm sure many other emerging markets would have also done. These are the things on which global interaction like this will have to address. So the four categories I've said, the poor, the farmer, the youth, they want a world better than what we have seen. And therefore the youth's concern will have to be heard. They'll have to be given support for education, for skilling, for upskilling, and finding the right kind of environment, either to be self-employed or to find a job in a company or in some institution. And the last one, which I'm very grateful to the Prime Minister, to women. So the fourth category, not in that order, in any order, women. We need more women in policy making. We need more women in businesses. We need more women in the boardrooms. We need more women even on the shop floors. Today, India, in the rural hinterland, is giving drone techniques to women, supplying them with drones so that they can go to the field and undertake more healthier practices, such as spraying the fertilizer on the leaves rather than enriching with pesticides the soil, which is now going deep into the grounds, poisoning our waters. So the women, the drone Didis, as I can use this expression, are the ones who are going to deliver the villages to take care of Mother Earth, to produce more crops, and be the ones who are going to be mastering the technology for maintaining and operating the drones in the villages for agricultural purposes. So I understand I've taken too much of your time, but effectively the points that I want to place before you is that this institution or this arrangement should become a calendar event. It should churn out thoughts for the global south and also for the rest of the world. You should be the ones who set the agenda for the next 25 years so that the world moves on the right direction and doesn't fall into such serious concerns as war, as epidemic, where we are not able to help one another, or run for vaccines from one country to another, and so on. Countries can benefit by adapting technology into policy making. So thank you again, Professor Hosman, for being here and talking to us. Thanks, CII, for having taken this initiative. And thanks to every one of you who have come here and who would enrich this conversation and make it possible for the world to hear from you about what we need to do in the next decades. Thank you very much.